Hey, this is the Excel video 3, which is over entering labels and values and using the AutoSum. To enter content in a cell, you can type on the formula bar or directly into the cell itself. When entering content in a worksheet, you should start by entering all the labels first. And labels are entries that contain text and numerical information that are not used in calculation, such as on here, hours, OT hours, hourly rate. Or you could have such things as 2009 sales or travel expenses. Labels help you to identify the data in a worksheet in their rows and columns, and it makes your worksheet easier to understand. Now the values, on the other hand, are numbers, formulas, and functions that can be used in calculations. And to enter a calculation, you first of all need to make sure that you type in the equal sign plus your formula for the calculation, because remember that all formulas and functions have to have the equal sign to start it out so it knows what you're doing. Now, functions are actually built-in formulas, and we're going to learn about these in the next unit on there a little bit more, but we're going to use some of these formulas on there at this time. So if we take a look at step 1, step 1 tells us to click on cell A15. So we're down here at the bottom, we're on a blank cell. And it tells us that, notice that the mode indicator on the status bar, when we click on the formula bar, shows us that instead of ready, we are now in edit mode. So notice where it says edit here. So that means that we are editing this cell. And you are now in edit mode, and at any time you are entering or changing the contents of a cell, that's when you are in edit mode. Here, if we type in the word totals, this is step 2. It tells us to type totals. So we now can see that we should be having some totals across this bottom line. Once we have that, we can click on our enter button here, the little check mark, and notice that we're now back to the ready mode. Of course, clicking the enter button accepts the entry. And of course, you'll notice that the new text is automatically left aligned, and that labels are left aligned by default. Now, values are right aligned by default. And of course, Excel recognizes an entry as a value if it's a number or begins with a symbol such as plus, minus, equal to, at, number, or dollar sign. And when a cell contains both text and numbers, Excel recognizes it as a label. So if you want to use it as a value, it has to have one of those special symbols like plus, minus, equal sign, at, number, or dollar sign for it to recognize it as a value, but it has to have a number as well. If there's any text involved into it, it will not see it as a value. Next, it's going to tell us that we need to click on cell B15. Now in B15, what we want to do is we want this cell to total the hours worked by all the tour guides that we have here. And you might think you need to create a formula that is B5, or it would be equals B5 plus B6 plus B7 plus B8 plus B9 plus B10 plus B11 plus B12 plus B13 and plus B14. However, and that would give you the correct answer if you did that. However, it'd be very time consuming. What we're going to do is we're going to show you an easier way here, and that is using step 4. And step 4 tells us we want to click on the AutoSum button. And the AutoSum button is up here on our Home tab in our editing group, and we're going to click on AutoSum. Now notice that this gives us a function here of equals, sum, and then it has the range. If you remember when we highlighted this area a little bit ago, that was the range that we told you, B5 to B14. And this is, like I said before, the sum function. That is inserted into our formula. And of course, what it's going to do is it's going to suggest a range. And that suggested range is in the parentheses. Now, of course, once we said before, a function is ultimately a built-in formula, and that's what this is. And of course, the range, the B5 to B14, is what we call the argument. And that is the information necessary to calculate the answer, as well as the cell references and other unique information. So when we click the AutoSum button, it's going to choose the adjacent range. So in this case, the information above it that's on there. Or it could go to the left as well. But you can adjust this just by selecting different areas. So if I want to add this, notice that I moved my range over and that information's there. But I'm just going to select this back again because we want to go to B5 to B14. Once we have that, we're going to click on our enter button and notice that it has now given us the total number of hours for all these employees. And if you remembered earlier when we had this selected, notice that the sum of 378, that's what we have right there, is 378. And notice how that is so much more efficient and so much quicker than grabbing a calculator and adding up these 10 different numbers. Now the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to click on, and this is going to be on step 6, we're going to click on cell C13, where it tells us that the overtime hours is 5. What we're going to do is we're going to type 6. Now, whenever you click an active cell and start typing, it's going to erase all the information that's out of that cell, and it's going to replace it with whatever you type it into. Now, that's a little bit difficult when you're working with names, because if I would click on a name and start trying to add in a character or try to add in a middle name, it's going to erase the entire name unless I click up in here on the formula bar. But what we're going to do is we're change that 5 to a 6, and we're going to hit our enter key. And you'll notice that our overtime pay has now increased. The number 6 is right aligned, and the cell pointer actually moves over to, or moves to C14. So whenever you hit the enter key, that actually makes the active cell go down 1. And of course you'll notice that in cell F13, that value has changed. Now let's try this again. Let's go ahead and click on cell C18. So we're going to actually change in and add a new value. And on this one, we're going to type in, and this is step 7, average gross pay. And we're going to press enter. That will accept that. So you can tell that now we have another label, and we think of, maybe our average of the gross pay is going to go in this, somewhere next to this label. Now, the next thing that we're going to do is, it tells us that we're going to click and hold cell B15. So we're going to go back up here to B15. So when we click and hold on this, we're going to drag our mouse pointer over to G15. Because what we ultimately want here is that we are going to add up all these columns. Now you could go and click on cell C15, hit AutoSum, hit enter, go to cell D15, hit AutoSum, hit enter. But what we're going to show you is what's called the fill button. And the fill button actually allows us to take a formula and copy it across multiple cells. And that's what we're going to do. So once we drag this over to cell G15, we're going to go up here to our editing group, right underneath the AutoSum, and there's the fill. And notice it has some different directions. We have down, right, up, and left. Now we do have series and justify, but we're not going to mess with the series and justify on there. We're going to click to the right because you'll notice this little blue line here on the side on all these. That is where your formula is at. And it tells you where you're going to fill it to. So if we fill it to the right, our formula is on the left, and it's going to fill all the information to the right. So we're going to go ahead and click on that. And now notice that all the formulas have been automatically there. The calculated values have appeared. If we click on each of these, notice there's sum C5 to C14, D5 to D14, and all these have now been created off of this one formula here. And so now you notice that the fill button is a very useful tool for you when you're actually going through and having to copy a formula from one to the next. Now, of course, also remember while you're navigating a sheet, and of course navigating is the same thing as moving around. Don't forget you can always use your arrow keys. So if I go through here and just hit my arrow keys, and now I'm going through it pretty quickly, that moves my active cell or my cell pointer to a different location. Now, as well, there's a few other keyboard shortcuts that you may want to use as well. If I want to move a screen up or a screen down, I'm going to use my page up or page down keys. So if I would hit page down, notice that, oh my goodness, all my information's gone. But take a look, all of my row headings are much larger. If I hit page up, notice it comes back up to the top. Now if I want to move a screen to the left, I can use my Alt key and page up or page down. So if I hit Alt and hit, or page down, excuse me, notice it takes me all the way over to column X. If I hit Alt page up, notice it takes me back on there as well. Of course, if you're looking to quickly jump to the first cell in a worksheet, Control Home, just exactly like you would in Word. Or if you want to jump to the last cell that is in this area, you can hit Control End and notice that it takes us to the very last column and the very last row that we've been working on. So that concludes this video here. The next video is all going to be about editing cell entries.